Hello, how are you guys? Today we're doing something a little different. You may have noticed the music. You may have noticed I am a ghost. Yes, today we're going to do something again a little different. As some of you might know, it was May the 4th is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. And I got an idea from a certain someone to maybe do a class on Star Wars. Go a little nerd, as it were. So join me. Let's talk a little bit about Star Wars, why it's so important, why it's a multimedia phenomenon. All right. I hope you guys are with me. And with that, we begin. So Star Wars. All right. Star Wars is, I guess, all of you have heard of it. And it's a big franchise. All right. It's something that has been around for many years. And I hope that I can bring you guys some information and some culture as to how it all started. I am not going to focus on symbols and all the characters and stuff like that. But I am going to talk a little bit about George Lucas and how he began his company and how Star Wars came to be. And hopefully you guys can know a little bit more about this since it's such an important pop culture idea, such a pop culture phenomenon. All right, let's go. But first, let me just, there we go. And let's relocate. Very well. We are going to begin with the preview. Then we go on to words in action before moving on to the beginning, featuring a new watching, after which comes the media phenomenon, ending with what happened next. Very well. Beginning with the words in action. First, we begin with epic. What is epic? It's something of huge dimensions, something that affects everyone, right? It's a big, big thing. Then we have bankrupt. It's not a good word. It means you have no more money. Você faliu, you're going bankrupt. Franchise, in Portuguese we say franquia, which is when you have many different properties under the same name. Merchandising pretty much means anything related to marketing. So anything that is on the market that has a brand is merchandising. Cult following. What is a cult following? You have a cult following when many people decide to follow the same thing, even despite critiques, even despite other people's badly perceived idea, people still choose to follow something. They still choose to like something. Like those guys up there. That is a cult following. Is it a bad thing? Not necessarily, right? We then go on to a hit. What is a hit? In the context of this class, a hit is something that is really good. It's something that got released and everyone got immediately into it. People really like something, then it's a hit. It's instantaneous. Feature, you might have heard it before, but in this context, a feature is a film. It's a feature film. It means a movie that has usually from 1 to 2 hours. It's not a short film, it's a feature film. Then we go on to spin-off. What is a spin-off? When you have a main series of, say, movies, then you have spin-offs, which are movies that are not in the main series. They are separated and they are shown apart. That is a spin-off. It's not within the main series. And then you have a fandom, which is a type of cult following. It's when that cult gets together and people start appreciating a media franchise together. Then it becomes a fandom. All right, let's go on. Moving on to episode 3, the beginning. I hope you know that guy. What is his name? His name is George Lucas. He created Star Wars in 1977. Well, that's when it was released. He wanted to define Star Wars as an epic space opera. So he wanted to make a big space movie, but first he couldn't because he was almost bankrupt. He had no job and he bet everything he had on a previous film, and he showed it to many studios, he showed it to Universal, and they didn't want to make his space movie. It was just a big investment that people didn't want to make. But then he pitched it to 20th Century Fox. I think you might have heard that name. And they actually wanted to see his movie, which they did, and they loved it. And they decided to make Star Wars. And it was a hit. Star Wars was released to universal acclaim. Everybody loved Star Wars. And because everyone liked it, it gave Lucas the opportunity to finish the project. The first Star Wars movie didn't even have a name. It was just Star Wars. And after it became a success, Lucas then re-released Star Wars as Episode 4: A New Hope. But in the beginning, it was just Star Wars. It then went on to become the most successful film merchandising franchise in the world. It was one of the biggest franchises in the whole world. Lucas went on to create other companies, which you might have heard of, maybe not. He created Industrial Light and Magic, also known as ILM, for the special and visual effects. And this company still today does effects for many other movies, for a lot of Disney movies, for Marvel movies, the Avengers. All those movies have a hand from ILM. He also created Skywalker Sound. Pay attention to the next epic movie you watch. You may see at the very end a little logo for Skywalker Sound. Lucas didn't really have the technology to make all this stuff, so he created a technology. He created the companies to do what he wanted to do. And Lucasfilm, where it all came together. All those companies were under Lucasfilm. He then went on to use Lucasfilm to create he created the Indiana Jones franchise. He created the Indiana Jones franchise and many other movies and games under the Lucasfilm company. Right? It was a big, big history, but it wasn't easy. Let's take some time to watch this little short video on how they did the effects for Star Wars. It's kind of impressive. Let's take a look. Episode 4, I know watching.
The chess pieces are actually rubber figures wired with movable joints. Using stop-action photography, every movement of the creatures is filmed one frame at a time. When played back, the creatures come to life in continuous motion. They are then added to the chessboard. The Falcon, in which the intrepid adventurers are traveling, is in fact a model. Designed and built by a Hollywood special effects house, it is photographed by a computer-controlled camera. By photographing the model against a blue screen, it will later be possible to add different backgrounds and other moving objects to the scene. This can be done by means of double and triple exposures. The work is painstaking and precise. It is an endeavor where details count. match the director's concept for this scene without actually building a huge and expensive set, the filmmakers resort to what is called a glass painting shot. Thousands of miles from the stage in England, a California artist paints a background on glass that will later surround the scene in which Alec Guinness appears. A blank spot is left on the glass painting for the live-action scene filmed on the London stage. The glass painting is then photographed, and the scene with Alec Guinness will be incorporated within it. The final effect is a masterful illusion. For the space-age dogfight, detailed models are used. With the computer controls developed especially for Star Wars, it was possible to film the elements for this sequence with a freedom never before exercised in motion picture production. By controlling the motion of the camera and by remembering those motions, the computer allows for more complex and visually dynamic photography. Again, the models are photographed against blue screen to allow for the placement of other elements into the scene. The surface of the Death Star, until now seen only as a graphic, must now be rendered as a model. To effect attacks on the model by the rebel planes, explosions are sometimes triggered by primitive mechanisms. Similarly, the miniature planes are wired with small charges.
Wow.
It took 2 years and $3.5 million to do the Star Wars miniature
2
and optical effects.
years.
This camera provides a pilot's eye view of an attack on the Death Star. Thousands of hours are devoted to collecting all the elements necessary for the final sequence.
The rest, as they say, it's history. I guess we can kind of get an idea of how hard it was to make all that stuff, right? You got to film everything, you got to know what everything goes, and you don't have, at that time, they did not have computer graphics or CGI as we do today. So compositing was a little hard. They had to do it manually on the film. Wow. Let's go on to the media phenomenon. So Star Wars wasn't just a film, it became much, much more. It generated a cult following. It was like nothing that had come before. People had done Star Trek, people had done Doctor Who, they had done science fiction before, but never in this scale. It was just so big, and the effects were brand new. It was just, as I said before, George Lucas had to create a company just to make the effects that he wanted to make. And because of that, it inspired many other such films and series. Many other space films started using the effects that Star Wars pioneered. So even Star Trek, whenever they fly through space, started doing the same as Star Wars with the stars coming at you and all that stuff. It was all because of what Star Wars had done before. And now for some trivia. Did you know that Pixar and THX started out as child companies to Lucasfilm? That's right. At some point, Pixar was a sub-company of Lucasfilm. Also, THX. You don't know THX? Maybe you will if I show you a little clip. Let me just say that earphones are recommended for this. All right? You got your phones on? Let's listen and watch. Whoop. So yes, that company, THX, used for many sound effects in films throughout the years, was created as well by George Lucas. And you may know, but this company has done effects for many movies in recent years, and it's one of the biggest sound companies ever for movies and video games and all kinds of media. So what happened next? What happened to Star Wars next? They went on to develop 9 main series films, episodes. They started with episode 4, 5, and 6. Then went on to do 1, 2, 3, and then episodes 7, 8, and 9, which came out last year. They also did 2 feature spin-offs, which was Rogue One and Solo: A Star Wars Story. They also did several animated series for TV, above 10, I have no way to count, and countless comic books and novels, and an undying fandom. As I said, Star Wars is one of the biggest media franchises ever. Let's just do some quick questions here. What about you? Are you a fan of Star Wars? Do you guys like Star Wars? Do you enjoy all the films? Or are you one of the people that don't really like all of the films? And how big would you say that the impact of Star Wars is in pop culture? All of these questions will be in the homework as well with others. Let's review real quick again. We began with the preview menace, then went on to words in action, before moving on to the beginning, featuring a new watching, after which came the media phenomenon, and we ended with what happened next. Just a few quick reminders once again. Stay tuned for the instructions from CRA, guys. Remember to do your homework because it will count as attendance. This is it for me. I will be signing out, and I'll see you next time. And may the 4th be with you. Bye-bye, guys.